Okay, in this section, we're in Chapter 5, Section number 4 of Chapter 5. We want to look at passive transport, specifically diffusion and osmosis. Then we'll come back and look at another section with facilitated diffusion. So, diffusion is strictly a physical process, not necessarily a biological process, but it does occur in living organisms. So, diffusion is a movement of molecules from where they're in high concentration to where they are in lower concentration, and it is due to the random movement of the molecules. It does not require any energy on the part of living cells, so it is said to be a passive process, or that is, it is passive transport. Passive transport means that there is no expenditure of energy on the part of the cells. Active transport means that the cells must use energy to cause the diffusion to occur. And diffusion occurs in all types of materials, both living and non-living, as well as all types of materials in terms of gas, liquid, or solid. Now, since gas is most loosely arranged, has the most loose arrangement of the molecules and the fastest movement of the molecules, diffusion occurs fastest in a gas. It occurs somewhat slower in a liquid where there's more restriction on the movement of the molecules, and in a solid where there's very little freedom of movement of the molecules, diffusion occurs at a very slow rate. The movement in diffusion is said to be along or down a concentration gradient. That is, again, we're moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And so the term gradient refers to a physical difference between two locations. We could have a temperature gradient where there's a temperature difference between two locations. We could have, in this case, a concentration gradient. There's a difference in concentration of whatever, salt, sugar, whatever it may be, between these two locations. So, if we go right here and look at it, we're going to have an area where there's a high concentration of some kind of material, let's say maybe oxygen. And here, there's a low concentration of oxygen. Oxygen will move from where it's in a high concentration to a low concentration. Same thing would happen with any other gas or sugar in a liquid or what have you. So let's go over here and notice here's the example. We've got a sugar cube was placed right here in the container, and as it dissolves, we've got the highest concentration of sugar right there. Well, these sugar molecules are bouncing around, bouncing off of each other, bouncing off the water, and ever so often, at random, one of these sugar molecules bounces further out. So after a little more time, the sugar has expanded over a larger area. Eventually, this sugar has completely filled the area, and it is just evenly distributed in that container of water. Now, once we no longer have a difference in concentration, we no longer have diffusion. Diffusion occurs as long as we have this concentration difference, and this material is moving out from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, one other thing about diffusion is that if we have a large difference between two locations, we are going to have if we've got a steep gradient, we're going to have very rapid rate of diffusion. If we have a lower gradient, we're still going to have diffusion, but it'll be at a slower rate. If there is no gradient, then materials move, or molecules will move back and forth in an even exchange. Okay? So, no gradient, no diffusion. Okay, so let's look at an example of diffusion. Okay, so right here, That is a set of lungs. That is a big toe. This is a circulatory system. Okay? So, we have three areas here. We have the air in the lungs, we have the blood, and we have various tissues throughout the body. Now then, let's look at the diffusion of oxygen. Now we have to do some work to pull oxygen pull all this air into our lungs, force the air out of our lungs. We have to do some work to circulate all this fluid around the body, but the movement of the oxygen molecules across the cell membranes does not require any output of energy on our part. It is a physical process, and it occurs by means of diffusion. The oxygen molecules move from where they're in high concentration to where they're in low concentration. So, if the oxygen is going to move from the air to the blood to the tissue, then we have to have a gradient like this, where we have the highest concentration of oxygen in the air, then lower concentration in the blood, and then our lowest concentration of oxygen would be here in the tissue. So movement would be downhill from area of high concentration to low concentration. Okay, well, now what about if we're looking at movement of carbon dioxide? Okay, carbon dioxide normally moves the opposite direction. Carbon dioxide normally is going to move out of the body. So we've got our three areas: air, blood, and tissue. Carbon dioxide is going to move from the tissue to the blood to the air. So that means that the air has to have the lowest concentration of carbon dioxide, and our tissue has to have the highest concentration of carbon dioxide. Blood would be intermediate. So diffusion of carbon dioxide from the tissue to the blood, from the blood to the air. Okay, we get to osmosis, and let's stop there and we'll pick up osmosis in another video. So, thank you for listening. I hope this has helped you. Okay, and